Hey everyone, how are you all doing? And welcome to Kayan Al-Bashar Grand Central Station, where today we are kinda all over the place, so that's why I'm going to try and keep the commentary this video a little bit more focused. But we are basically building some highlights, I would say, because I want to keep some things a surprise for when the cinematic on the Grand Central Station goes live. So yeah, also I spent way too much time on the dome that we're going to build today. But anyway, so we are going to build 4 things today. The first off is the inside of the entrance. If you guys remember the first episode on the Grand Central Station, we basically built the outside facade and not really the inside, so that's what we are doing actually right now. And then the second thing is a fountain, because why not? And then the third thing is a little bit more out there, but it's an elevator, and it was kind of surprising that I needed to build an elevator, or at least wanted to build an elevator. And then the last thing, of course, is the giant dome, which actually grew quite a bit larger than I originally intended, but bigger domes are always better in some cases, or at least don't take that out of context, let's just say that. But anyway, so for the inside of the entrance, so I wanted to have an area where, let's say, if there were like delays with public transport, because yes, Kayan Al-Bashar is a fancy place, but even in a fancy place like Kayan Al-Bashar, public transport will probably be like a nightmare, probably, even though it's basically made of like airships, or at least right now it's just floating or hanging gondolas, but yeah, I still consider it like public transport in Kayan Al-Bashar, and we all know that that's, well, usually public transport doesn't have like the best reputation when it comes to like being on time and such things. But anyway, so I wanted to have an area where announcements like that could be made, because of course like electronics aren't in Kayan Al-Bashar, so there needs to be an actual person screaming that. And to have him scream that from like the platform or something, nobody's going to hear that, especially like, well, I think with every like Grand Central Station, or just a big station for public transport, like train stations, but also like, let's say, an airport, just any place of large public transport, there are going to be thousands of people just walking around, and of course running, because again, public transport sometimes it's just hell on earth. But yeah, if that person would just be, or the person making the announcement would just be on the actual ground, or at least on like the ground floor, nobody would hear him. But then I also made a secondary balcony, I would say, for, let's say, because Kayan Al-Bashar Grand Central Station is such a large building. By now it's the largest building I have ever created. Actually, it was already that in the last video, but actually even in the first video it was already the largest building when it came to piece count that I created. But because of that, I thought like, alright, if let's say the Sultan or Emir or whoever is in charge in Kayan Al-Bashar came down to make some kind of public statement or something like that, he would probably want to also be off the ground. But of course he wouldn't want to share his area with just someone announcing delays. So I gave him an extra balcony. And also to make the balcony on the outside of, or facing the outside of the Grand Central Station a little bit more sense, I made it so that that balcony actually just is also part of the larger, let's just say, high status balcony. So just anyone with like influence or who holds control or power in Kayan Al-Bashar will probably be on the higher balcony. So yeah, it's a little bit of like making up a story behind the buildings. Makes it also easier to build if you have like a little bit of like realistic influence in a building, because then you know like, alright, this person would need that or that. And that's why the building needs to have that or that. And because it's like also like the announcement slash statement balcony for, let's say, the Sultan of Kayan Al-Bashar, which, thinking back about it, I built a palace for myself, so does that mean that I would be on the higher balcony? I hope not, because I don't really do well with heights. And yeah, but anyway, because of that, later on I will also build, basically on the lower part or just on the ground floor, a fence, so that you can only get access to the balconies if you actually are either, you know, the one making the announcements of the delays or just any kind of mishap with public transport, or if you're the Sultan or just like a member of his household. So I didn't want to put in an actual staff pot because, well, the guests in Planet Zoo don't really like that, and because this is the entrance, and later on I am going to put in like the spawn points and the actual zoo entrance also in here. But because of that, I didn't want to have like an actual staff pot here because they don't like that and might even be deterred from going to, let's say, the Red Pandas, the Flooded Ziggurat, any place actually. I have no clue if they're actually going to really use the hanging gondolas, but I'm just going to imagine they do. I mean, for now, like, you can already see it down below, there's no one in Kayan Al-Bashar. And actually the, how would I call it, well, the annoying pop-ups or notifications of the animals, I don't have a lot of like welfare cases, or just where I had bad animal welfare. Unless I actually changed it to winter, and then of course I get 40 of them. But yeah, for the rest, with the announcement balconies, I would just call them now, there's not much to it, it's just like giving a little bit more dimension to the actual, well, I don't need to call them a gate, but just the entrance to the Grand Central Station. I do really like that the entrance is not like front or not central in the building, it's basically off to the side. And that helps in making the building not look completely symmetrical because, well, a completely symmetrical building, I just think of like the palace in Versailles. I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I know, but I just can't, I've tried, but I'm just thinking of like French chateaus when I think of like a very symmetrical building. And I just think that's a little bit boring for Kayan Al-Bashar. I really like to have the buildings in Kayan Al-Bashar to be very like organic. So that like the one with the largest towers when it comes to piece count is like the first part that they built. And then they later just added onto it as the Grand Central Station needed to have more room for all the travelers. But now we are at the fountain, which this is the area where actually the after video views are the most stable, because, well, it's not the recording software. I might have already talked about this, but I'm just going to repeat it if I ever did, because mind of a goldfish here. But I made an after video view of the fountain, and it's actually like a static, and I don't move the camera around with that shot. But I already complained in the last video, like, oh, there's a lag or just stutter with those after video views. And it's not in the recording software, it's not in the editing or rendering software, it's in the game. Which I should have foreseen because, well, I have towers that are like 8K pieces. So whenever the camera moves, it like, of course, it unloads things that aren't in view, and it loads things that are in view. So whenever I touched the tower, it was just like, no. So yeah, I might have to either upgrade my PC again, which let's just say I just did that, so that might have to wait a little bit. Or I need to have static views with the actual after video views. Which I don't really like, because then you just get one angle to what you see. And then I could just as easily just put in a picture or a screenshot. But with the fountain, there's actually movement to the view, so that's why that one was static. But here I wanted to also have a little bit of not to... I don't know if it's like Arabian folklore or just... Well, is let's just call it, I think, Arabian, because it isn't only Islamic folklore, but with Kayan Al-Bashar, I wanted to also have, again, the mystical feel to it. There needs to be like a reason why Kayan Al-Bashar floats. So I basically thought of like jinns, or at least I think if I need to make it a Western thing, it's a genie, but I'm just going to call them jinns, which is probably also the wrong pronunciation, but I just pronounce it the way it's basically written, which is jinn or din, or I'm just going to call it jinn. You guys will probably say it if I'm pronouncing it completely wrong. But I did want to go with like the genie in the bottle feel, so basically that's what this fountain alludes to. And then there is, well, the highest, well, actually it's a vase, but the highest vase is uncorked, and there's actually like smoke coming out of it. So I basically just want to really have that reference of like the genie in the bottle almost, or this time genie in the vase. And I've, yes, grown insane with those golden pieces. Also, it was a little bit of a hassle because I don't know how I did it, but some of the water sprouts or spouts are not doing correctly, and I didn't want to have water actually sprouting out from the faces. I wanted to see the smoke, not the water. So that was a little bit of like a, alright, let's cut it here, because I needed to, as you can see, basically redo a lot of those faces in the end, because yeah, I didn't want to have the water going out of there. But yeah, 4 of those faces are corked, I would say, and then the upper one is not, just to make it look like one of the genies or jinns has escaped. But now we are on to the elevator, which was kind of a weird thing because, well, the general like ideas, like, yeah, elevators, you need to look at like post-industrial evolution for, or evolution, post-industrial revolution for that. But there are some like references that some people, like going back to classical times, had like some sort of elevator type construction. Not an actual elevator, but something that could be interpreted as one. So I just went with that, and of course Kayan Al-Bashar, not realistic, not historically accurate. I'm taking literally architecture styles from medieval to basically, well, let's just say late Renaissance architecture styles. So it's all over the place. So yeah, I just needed an elevator because I didn't want to have huge stairs here. So I basically, this is what surprised me, but Planet Zoo made me look into how would that have worked. Basically into like all the technical aspects of like, how would I make an elevator work which didn't have anything beyond manpower or horsepower or just any kind of like actually like not, let's say, steam or electricity powered power. So yeah, actually I made 2 versions of this elevator. The one you see now, which is completely made in wood, but I also made one that's made in steel. So yeah, it's the steel one, I was almost completely finished with it. It had like, instead of ropes, it had the chains. Instead of like the wooden beams, of course, it had steel or iron beams. But in the end, I didn't want to go with that one just because it felt really out of place. So in the end, I did go with a wood one, which is the one you see right now. I still have the steel one, and it looks quite similar to this one. So if you guys want to have the steel or iron elevator version of this one, do let me know, because then I can easily put it on the workshop if you want to. It kind of looks very similar to this one. Of course, some details are different because yeah, we have a lot of steel or iron pieces, but they of course don't look the same as like the wooden pieces. And yeah, I still really like the steel elevator, but it just didn't fit in with the building. And also because I spent way too much time on the dome of this Grand Central Station, I didn't show it off of like how I built it, but you can basically get the basics of the elevator building while it's basically the same. Actually I don't think, yeah, the steel one doesn't have doors yet. That's the one thing where at that point I stopped myself because it was like, this doesn't look right. Like everything in Grand Central Station right now is like either stone or wooden, and then to have like this massive steel box just didn't feel completely right. And also I think from like the references, or like the, not really references, because of course there's no, at least if I'm correct, and I can be completely incorrect, but there are like mentions of like elevator-like constructions back to classical times, but of course there are no like real images. There are like some things that look like an elevator, and or at least have like the same function as an elevator, but some of them look completely different to others, so I basically just went with a box and then some pulleys and ropes and such. Going off, I don't know if it's actually, let's just say I basically made out an elevator. And I really like it, but it's certainly out there. Even in Kayan Al-Bashar, an elevator looks strange. And of course it's not functional, because elevators don't really work in Planet Zoo. And of course all of the pieces are static. But I also wanted to include like how the elevator would have worked. So there are a lot of like pulleys and ropes, or I think they're called pulleys, but just, you know, things to make the elevator actually go up. So that was interesting to build, because of course we don't really have much to really simulate movement. But let's just say it gives the idea of movement, which is what I wanted to go for. It also hangs like a little bit off the ground, even though the doors are open, which probably isn't the safest thing, but I just wanted to really have that like, yes, this is an elevator. If it was just on the ground, then it wouldn't really look, or at least it wouldn't really feel like an elevator, at least in my opinion. Also having some small counterweights to make the raising and lowering of the elevator a little bit easier, because this elevator is basically pulled up, or at least maybe there's like some kind of like, let's say a horse or ox downstairs in the basement pulling up the elevator, but it is pulled up by either animals or by 4 men or 8. I'm trying to find excuses of like, how can I make this look somewhat workable? So the counterweights are just really to make it easier to pull up, even though I might have done that a little bit wrong. But besides that, it's basically just rotate this cog or something that I'm building right now, and then the elevator would go up. I wanted to also have like some kind of like a system that if the elevator is up and the people stop pulling or basically raising the elevator, that it doesn't just drop down, so that there's some kind of like brake system. In the end, that didn't really go through. So yeah, there is it can't go higher than the actual floor that it needs to go on, but it also can drop. But then if you imagine like oxen or something pulling it in the basement, then there will probably be a little bit more security, because ever try to get an ox to move if it doesn't want to? Yeah, probably not. Also having a little bit of a safety feature, because of course we don't want kids to get their hands on like the machinery behind the elevator. Also to just hide the machinery a little bit. But that's basically where I made another, well, lattice work to just hide it away a little bit. And so that for like guests and such, it doesn't look as industrial, I would say. So that all of like the not so nice looking work is actually off site or not seen as much. But in the end, I think it might work. I'm still surprised that Planet Zoo made me build an elevator. Or at least, I can't really say that because I built the elevator because, well, the Grand Central Station now is just... Well, how do I make an excuse for that? I mean, it was fun because I never really thought of like, alright, how would I need to make an elevator that isn't like industrial? Or at least industrial era themed. So it still feels like it fits in with the Grand Central Station, even though the real like technology to make this actually work would probably not have been around. Or at least people would probably have known how to, well, raise things, of course, like otherwise like all those cathedrals, mosques and all those huge buildings wouldn't have been built if they weren't able to raise all the stone up. But probably like an elevator construction like I built might not have been around. Might have been some other form, but I just like the elevator. But now onto the massive dome, because big domes are always better. And yes, you can already see the original, well, hole for the dome is smaller. So I actually pushed it out a little bit more just to give a little bit more of an impressive dome. I'm not going to show everything of the dome. I'm going to show all of the outside of it, but the inside I'm not going to show everything just because, well, I want to keep a surprise. And I need to figure out how to make it look great. Because it's a massive dome. However, sadly, I'm thought of the dome just to have like a huge beacon of light, but then I forgot like, a dome is completely enclosed. Yeah. So Grand Central Station right now is a little bit of a dark building. But, well, I'm going to put in like actually holes in the ceiling so that there's like, well, lattice windows, or at least the woodwork, so that there is like beacons of light streaming into the Grand Central Station. And maybe I'm going to trick you a little bit with like lights and such. But then everything in Kayan Al-Bashar, if you believe like jinns and such, can be smoke and mirrors. So it actually fits if like the actual building would have been a dark building. But yeah, the dome was in a way the largest thing to build so far. I think the actual dome, like the walls that you see be built right now, I think have the highest piece count for a single building. And the Grand Central Station is of course built in multiple buildings actually. So if you click one tower, it doesn't select the whole building, it just selects that one tower because it's one building. Also, I'm building a little bit of a mosaic work, and here I can honestly say this wasn't my idea, or at least not my original idea. Complete credit goes to Mike Sheets for that, because I saw a picture of him like using this and I just thought like, wait, what? So yeah, if you haven't watched any of Mike Sheets' videos, what are you doing here? Go watch them, because he is amazing and actually makes sense of nature instead of me throwing random things together and calling it nature. So yeah, if you don't or haven't watched any of his videos, please do, and he will probably do a lot better, or just a huge improvement on what I did. So the original idea for this mosaic comes from him, or just a picture that he posted, so again, watch him. I certainly do. Just so that I'm like, oh, that's how nature is supposed to work. But yeah, in the end, I can already give you a clue. I'm going to try and do the entire dome with this. Or at least not with this, because that would have been a full month's work to do the entire dome with that, but yeah, I'm going to make the dome entirely like the inside, make a complete mosaic into it. So that's also the reason why I didn't show you guys, or I'm not going to show you that, because that's going to take a long time. I'm already afraid of how long that will take. But when it comes to like the shape, I again went with like the cross pattern, where like it basically starts off with a cross and then you like slowly connect all the lines of the cross to make a pattern. So that's basically every pattern in Kayan Al-Bashar, I think, right now. Is starting off with a cross and then connecting the lines in like well, ways that make a beautiful, or at least good looking pattern. And I'm really liking it. And this is just like a little bit of like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it completely, but yeah, let's just say I like it, and I'm going to try and make the whole dome with this. So the dome is actually going to be two parts, the outside and the inside with the mosaic. But the dome was a little bit of a struggle, because of course you have the inside of the dome, which needs to look good. Then you have the outside of the dome, which also needs to look good. And you have like, with all the other walls, you have a little bit more margin of error, which you can hide. But with the inside of the dome that you see me start right now, if the outside looks good, that doesn't mean the inside looks good. So yeah, there's a lot of times where I'm like, alright, I like the outside shape of the dome, and then I look on the inside and it doesn't look great. Or like if I look on the, well, from the guest view, or like just the, let's say, street view of the dome, then it also looks weird. So there was a lot of times where I'm like, alright, how do I make this work? First of all, it's a huge dome, so that's something I'm also not going to show you, which is supporting this dome, because right now it just sits on the, well, the roof, and there's no support underneath it. So I don't really go for realism with like habitats and such, but with buildings I try to be a little bit realistic. So I'm going to need to actually make it so that the dome is a little bit supported also from underneath, so that it doesn't just collapse. So also I needed to make the dome a little bit, well, the walls that it sits upon I didn't want to make a lot higher, but I needed to make it look like the dome actually had a lot more height to it, because otherwise you wouldn't really see it from street view. So actually that also helps with the secondary dome, because as you can see, the dome is way too large. Well, I could make it into just one dome, but it just felt way too large. And by this point I can say honestly, I wasn't really inspired anymore by the domes of like mosques and such. This one was actually a little bit more inspired by the dome of the Duomo, I think, or at least Duomo is, I think, the Italian word for it, but let's just say the massive church in Florence, which does have like the double dome, sort of. Like it has the first dome, and then on top there's a little bit of like other dome, or at least other structure. So yeah, in the end I really like it still. I have taken a little bit of like inspiration from actually mosque domes, just so that I could get the Islamic architecture right. And this is where I'm like kind of debating the color of the building, because I mean, colors in, let's say, a religious building mean a lot. I think green, if I'm correct, but please do say it if I'm incorrect, but I think like green in Islam, or just, yeah, Islam, represents paradise. And I'm kind of fearing, what does red mean? Because, well, red usually is, well, used as like a color of like aggression and such. So does that mean that I've made like an aggressive dome? I mean, I still love the colors, and I'm, as you can see, or could see in the mosaic, I do use green, but yeah, Have I made a very angry dome? Have I made a dome that could make you very angry? Because I think that's like actually like official factual research now that like red makes people angry. I mean, fits with the whole public transport is sometimes a nightmare. So maybe the public transport isn't the worst thing here. Maybe it's just the color red everywhere. But yeah, so as I said, the dome was meant to be like a huge beacon of light. But as you can see, there are only a very few amount of windows. They're all quite small. They're all filled with this woodwork. So there's actually not much light coming in from the dome. Which is something I'm thinking about, just putting in an actual light in the top of the dome. Just to make it look like there's something shining down. So yeah, maybe for the next building I need to be a little bit more noticeable about the light, because now as you can see underneath it, it's a dark building. Actually, for the longest time, well, not the longest time, but for a long time, you can kind of see it in the background. There's still like this squares of light, or not square, the round sphere of light pouring in from the top of the dome. And I wanted to maintain it, but yeah, it didn't survive long. But I'm really liking the dome. I just like domes in general. So it's kind of nice that like almost every part of the Grand Central Station has a dome. And that, well, the dome is also, as I said, the biggest when it comes to pieces. Not actually the dome itself, which I was kind of surprised by. I thought that the dome itself, or at least the rounded part of the dome, was going to be the largest piece count. No. It's the walls that it sits upon. And this is where I kind of was not really surprised, but I thought that this was just an artistic style, or architecture style from, let's say, the Ottomans/Turks, which had the dome raised a little bit off the actual roof. So that's where like the walls that I built in come in place. No, that's actually in every dome. Well, not every dome probably, but most domes have it a little bit raised on like almost its own building part. I really like that though. It gives a little bit more, well, height to the building. Also just makes the dome way more impressive. Just because it has its own, basically own section of the building. But yeah, as you can see, in the end I did go for the, well, I'm going to call it right now a garlic shape, because it doesn't have that onion shape yet. It's going to have, because as I said, the dome needed to have a lot of height to the building, or at least a lot of height to the dome, otherwise you could not really see it. So all the other domes so far, well, besides the big dome, had more of like the garlic shape and not the onion shape. But this is the one dome that does get an onion shape. It looks a little bit weird from, well, when I built it, when I was like close by to it. But from the street view, it looks like a regular dome. Although it looks a lot higher, which is really what I went for. So yeah, the camera really moves spastically around for a little bit, just because I'm like, alright, does it look good from every angle? And then I saw that, oh, the dome is a little bit too, well, it cuts into the actual walls of the building on the inside. And this is again like, the outside looks good, the inside sometimes looks horrible. So I really needed to like go on the inside, make the inside look great, and then of course there are pieces sticking out to the outside, and then I needed to make those look good. So in the end, this dome was quite a bit of work, especially the upper one. Just because like the larger you build in Plant Zoo and Plant Coaster, the more room you have to hide errors or hide things that don't look as good. So yeah, with the smaller dome, I didn't really have that. So also, yeah, the domes right now on the inside just have basically is the same as the outside dome. as you have already heard, I'm going to change that, but I didn't want to do that on screen, just so that there's a little bit more surprise to it. And yes, I've gone insane with all those golden pieces. I mean, it's the largest dome. It also needs to have the largest ornamental spire to it. And did I go insane with that? Yes, because the first attempt looked a little bit like a turd. I'm not joking. I really thought that when I looked at it. In the end, I did fix it, and I'm really glad that we are actually ending off on the spire of the largest dome. I'm really also liking that the dome isn't colored in any way, it's just that sandstone color. But I think it's kind of fitting to end today's video on the spire of the massive dome. I think it's actually the highest point of the building now. But in the next video, which is going to be Wednesday, I'm going to build the outside area and the gardens. And then Friday, the airships, because I have never built an airship or just a ship in general, so I'm going to dedicate a whole video to that. As I rambled on about stained glass in the last video, and then Kalado mentioned that he would rather have the pieces or the piece to make a chain link fence to make realistic zoos, which I really understand, and I know that Frontier is probably having like already thoughts or maybe already working on like DLC. I mean, it's kind of given that Plant Zoo will have DLC, but what kind of pieces would you like to see in Plant Zoo? Do let me know. But anyways, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more. And I wish you all an amazing end of the weekend and start of the new week. Bye bye!